I think with anybody, there's a length of time, and everyone's length of time or timeline is different of how long you can believe BS. And what I mean by that is if I'm told something, it's like, don't believe your own eyes. If I'm told something that, these policies are great and we're just helping you, but then I look around and it's harder for me to pay for gas. It's harder for me to pay for groceries. The house I was able to buy 10 years ago is, double the price it is today. Eventually, reality sets in. And it's like, okay, I've been told this one narrative. They've been in political power. They've been ruling over me for decades. My life hasn't gotten better. So maybe something that's being told to me isn't true. And I think that's what was happening, right? I mean, you look at, again, I'm from Michigan. Detroit used to be the wealthiest country in the world. Detroit was wealthier than anywhere else, and now it's one of the poorest countries. Detroit used to be one of the wealthiest cities in the world. Now it's one of the poorest. That doesn't happen by accident. That happens because of political policies. And when you look at who's been in power in Detroit for 10, 20, 30 years plus, going back all the way to the Detroit riots, it's been the Democrats in power. So eventually people from Detroit have to realize, hey, these same people have been in power and they've been passing policies. They say they're helping me, but my life hasn't gotten better. So I like to call it cognitive dissonance, because if you eventually have to put who you're voting for and the results together. If you don't put that together, that's called cognitive dissonance, because what's happening and what you're voting for are directly correlated. But if you don't put them together, that's on the person, right? Going back to Detroit, if they keep voting the way they're voting, that's on them. How are you not correlating the policies to the results? Going back to the news, it's the same thing. If you're telling me something, but yet my reality around me doesn't reflect that, eventually I'm going to question that. So that's not on the people now believing Trump. That's on the media outlets not being truthful. But it took someone like Trump to expose it and to call it out, for people to unlock their conditioning to be like, you know what? That's actually true. And I don't think when you see there's been certain stories like Russia collusion. That was a fraudulent story that was bought and paid for Hillary Clinton, the Russian dossier, that was fraudulent. And for years, they said Trump was a Russian asset. That is a prime example of the government and media colluding together on a false, fabricated story to dictate and to condition the minds of the public. So there's so many of those examples, but it took someone like a President Trump to say fake news for people to be like, you know what? Yeah, because what they say and what I'm living are two drastically different things.
Mm-hmm. Actually, following up with the Russian collusion story, why do you think there has been no accountability and no repercussions on people making those fake stories? Why do you think there is this part of the government that is very established and that seem to be untouchable, that you can't do anything to them? Why do you think that even, let's say, when Trump was president, he wasn't able to put them where they belong, so to say, and make them be in a situation in which they would be responsible for their actions of lying to such a group of the population?
I think when it comes to people in political power not being held accountable, it's a few things. Number one, the government has gotten way too big, way too deep. Like, it shouldn't be so many layers of bureaucratic, rules, because someone knows someone who can, it goes to this person, and at the end of the day, our government has just been corrupt. There's too many people. There's too many people, and if you know someone that's high enough up, they can then dictate the results. So they're very strict on convicting the American people, but when it comes to political leaders, there's always some loophole in the situation where they're not held accountable. So I think that's because our government has gotten way too big. That's first and foremost. And then the other thing, it's up to the American people. We have short-term memory. We just forget about it. Oh, okay, doesn't matter. And then we move on to the next thing. And it's like, no, we have to ensure that people that do wrong are held accountable. But we are so, short attention span. And of course, we have busy lives and we have to worry about ourselves. but I think we forget that everything that goes on is directly correlated to ourselves. So it's the government's too big and the American people's attention span is way too short.